Hey, what is up everybody, Blades for here, and today for you guys another video of Persona 5X. Inside today's video guys, we're going to be going over the 4 stars and what to invest in here. Now this is one of the few things that my buddy the Jocks ended up working on and had a whole tier list for, and I asked him on Discord, hey, can I go ahead and review this and turn it into a little bit of a video, since actually one of you guys asked for this earlier this morning. So without further ado, we're going to be going ahead and doing that today, and I'm going to explain each of these characters and why I would say you should invest into them or not. So go ahead and sit back and relax and enjoy the video. But right before we get straight into it, I gotta say thank you guys very much for all the support y'all have been doing recently. The channel's been exploding ever since like the announcements from Atlas. It's been a absolute crazy ride here. So I'll be providing as much as possible when it does come down to at least editing and things like that, and try and make sure all the videos I actually end up producing are quality enough for you guys to actually enjoy. Now normally I have my editor who does like my build guide videos. He's also going to be doing those as well, but I'm going to try on some of my like side time when I can, other than doing like of course the infographics. I'm gonna try and actually learn to edit a little bit myself, so just in case he is actually a little too busy, I can try and do something for you guys and make it look good as well. So hopefully I'll appreciate that. But let's go ahead and talk about the tier list. So regarding this tier list here, man, the Jocks ended up making this. Be sure to give him a little bit of a follow here, and he ended up making it, and I have to say it's pretty much right dead on the money. So we're gonna go ahead and actually go over this and explain why most of these characters are like the way they are, and really should you keep them and just listen to this tier list for the most part. So I guess the first thing I can actually go ahead and do is let's start with the bottom tier list here, or at least the bottom tier character. Now this is called the do not invest tier, and boy oh boy is it correct here. So let's go ahead and see this. This is going to be Moko. Now Moko is a okay character, or at least was a okay character when the game first released. Even then in 1.0 she wasn't the best of units here. She used to be way better inside of the beta, but apparently even regarding that, after they changed a lot of things with this character, it just was no saving this character. Instead, she doesn't really specify with much at all when it does come down to things, and it really makes her very, very bad. Now they've had multiple buffs on at least their 4-star characters, and she was one of the few 4-star characters that also got a buff, but even with this in mind, it didn't really help her out. She was definitely still getting the bad part of the stick here, and it just doesn't make her any better. So if we go ahead and take a look at her skills first here, one of the first skills that we're going to look at is the Melody of Sigh. Pretty much what this does is an AoE damage here, or at least an AoE damage move here, that gives her 2 stacks of Greenleaf. Now Greenleaf is one of the few things that she does very more so need to pretty much do different things on her move sets. This is really going to be used more or less with either her Spirit Lullaby or also her Leaf Flute Hymn. And that's where a lot of other things are really going to come into play. Though you do need these actual things for these said green leaves to actually get these set effects. So one, you already have that first little stain here. The character herself is already lacking a lot of damage and lacking a lot of good things there, and it only does worse now that you see that you have to actually utilize certain stacks in order to make her even better. Well, these said green leaf stacks don't really do her justice. So taking a look at least at the second skill, which is Leaf Flute Hymn, what this does is it allows a companion to get Leaf Temperament. This increases their attack by 30%, and additionally it will increase the attack power compared to Tomoko's attack power. Now if I'm being honest, this character's attack power is never going to be that high. It is never going to be that good, so you already don't get a lot off this. And after of course they rework the character, you now get increased effect hit rate by 15%. This will last for 2 whole rounds, which is a pretty decent thing when it does sound like it on paper, but after you experience it, it's actually not that much. In fact, it's a lot less than a lot of people think it is, because Tomoko herself, you really don't need a ton of attack on her. She's a supporter, and really even that, even in the support category as built on attack, it doesn't really help you. It's not really needed, and even more so with her Spirit Lullaby, you don't really inflict characters or mobs with the sleep effect that she does have. It's not helping whatsoever, and so with a lot of things that really just ignore sleep, or a lot of mobs that just don't get inflicted with things like this, it's utterly useless. Her kit ends up being lackluster. It ends up not having what you really need to really utilize this character, even for the base type of the game. Instead of using characters like this, why would I use this instead when I can go ahead and go for a different buffer, or even go for a debuffer that can probably do this and more. So it kind of left this character a little bit in the dirt, in which I feel like this is kind of a hard thing for this character. In order to revive this character, or at least really make her worth it, they would have to rework her once again, not only make her a little bit better for EHR purposes to actually give her a different best in slot function for like Haru, for example, but they would definitely have to change up those skills accordingly to actually make them really good for any unit to come. But other than that, that's a lot of investment properties that you probably don't want to end up doing. Yeah, she does increase your allies' attack, or at least your allies' damage dealt, but it's only if there is a mental element inflicted. Do remember that mental element can only be inflicted to one person, not even an AoE affliction, so you kind of have a little bit of a problem there as well. So with all that in mind, I would definitely say you guys do not build this character. If anything, if you just do want to build her just for the looks, go ahead, do so. If she's maybe your favorite character, knock yourself out. But in otherly just a good standpoint, A6 and anything above this, or at least A0 to A6, even the A6 can't save this character. So I would highly suggest you guys not to invest into her. So going ahead and taking a little bit of a look back, at least at the tier list here, next character that we're going to go over is my man Sepia. Now Sepia himself had a very interesting time, especially in this game. Due to a little bit of a mistake that the devs ended up making with HP inflation, the man actually had a little bit of at least a shine in the game, but now he doesn't really get that too much anymore. And what I mean by that is because we had a little bit of a moment during SOS where bosses had insane amount of HP. For this character, of course, it does scale off those bosses' HP for our DOT mounts, and it made his DOT actually be really useful. But that only lasted for so long before, at least I want to say 2 patches in, they ended up replacing that and making sure it was fixed, and so his usability ended up dying. We also have other characters such as the man Mesa, who has a almighty bleed that's also a DOT that most people would rather use, or either use Panther if they really want a plain DOT instead of him. So pretty much Curse, especially as a DOT absolute usage, was just null and void. It didn't really have a place in the meta. It didn't really have a place as a character, and he didn't fit the just area for any type of team really. Sure, you could very well use him alongside of like Riddle being the little girl who has like the mining suit on. You could very well use him alongside of her, but still, even then, as a DOT user and as the main DOT DPS, it wasn't getting there. If you wanted him on a Curse team, yeah, you could use that, but who would want that over Joker? So even then, he was not having a good time. But with that out the way, let's go ahead and explain exactly what he does do. So the character can actually act as a detonator as well, but checking out his first skill called Sorrow Tragedy, he's able to deal 58.6% at least percent curse damage to one enemy. Now, of course, if you have him duped out up to me as well, and actually have skills up, of course, you'll get a little bit more out of the ordeal. I just did not feel like getting this man to 12 because it is just not worth it. But the base amount for it is 58.6 curse damage to one enemy 3 times. What this allows him to do is actually get 3 hatred bursts, in which when gaining this, there is a 25% fixed chance to convert the hatred burst up to 2 whole times. Now, this may sound like a lot of gibberish to some of you guys, in which don't worry, I'll explain this in a second here. Pretty much how this does work, it actually goes with a little bit of his passive, which is the passive called Curses. Each one of his verses, which is something that he ends up actually placing on a person here, which is mainly one of those little DOT things. It'll look kind of like a feather inside of his actual character here, but those are all verses. By having a certain amount of verses here, he's able to then apply a certain special verse here that allows him to do a follow-up. Pretty much with the 25% fixed chance that he has on this first skill, it can take those hatred verses and then convert them, or at least take the verses and convert them to hatred verses up to 2 whole time. Now, this sounds good. It sounds pretty decent, but with each of these hatred verses, it then will make a Sonnet of Song or a Sonnet of Fate, which has a 30% base chance to inflict curse. This is kind of how his DOT kind of starts. And although it has a lot of complexities to how it sounds, it's actually way simpler than it does. Pretty much think of it as a little bit of a tag here. We're gonna go ahead, place this first, and then that's it. Don't really have to do much else. You would just go ahead and place this. This builds up the stacks. Eventually, once you do have enough of these said stacks here, you'll be able to detonate it with the skill 3 later on, which can deal some decent damage, but since of course they reverted everything for this character, I don't even think that's going to save him as well. So first skill is kind of useless, but it's pretty much what you would end up using anyways. Now for the second skill, this one is practically just insanely useless. You don't ever use this skill, seeing it is an AoE curse, at least effect. And with this here, you will end up gaining 2 healing verses. And when you do have these verses, you're able to have a fixed chance for 25% and convert it to a healing verse up to 2 times. Now, if you do have these said healing verses here or recovering verses, it will then make the Sonnet of Song or Sonnet of Fate restore HP. Now, I'll be honest with you, this character is meant to be a damage dealer. So restoring HP off of dealing practically no damage and also not already having not really good HP and attack stats, it's utterly senseless to do, which furthermore made this character look even worse in that limelight. You already have a bad first skill, or at least a bad first skill that is a primary objective to use to start off your damage, and then you have a terrible second skill which is not needed at all. So that automatically made this guy very low on tier. But it did get worse, and that is the third skill. Now the third skill acts as a little bit of a detonator, as I did say before. Once you have a certain amount of passion verses here, this allows you to trigger the Sonnet Fate and deals an additional 7% of attack as almighty damage. This is where the DOT really does come in handy. DOT over here is more or less just almighty damage all around, so that's usually what you're going to be looking at it as. And you would usually take all of at least the verses that you currently put on and then end up wiping them later on with this skill 3. But it just wasn't good enough. It didn't help out this character at all when it came down to damage, and really was just senselessly useless in general. Even coming down to it, even just the combat skill. The combat skill I would say is probably better than the second skill itself, seeing his highlight is pretty decent, but the highlight was absolutely useless as well. It wasn't part of his wholehearted little system, so it just made no sense to really get up. This character just had all the odds stacked against him, and it's kind of one of the reasons why it's so low on the not to invest tier list. I mean, if they do bring back like high HP inflation units, I mean, he will have a little bit of a shine to him, but even then, I don't think that's even going to be enough to save this character. It's only just going to have to be a matter of time till we get a 5-star version of him, and we just have to pray that the man is actually good from there. But now that we went over Sepia here, let's go ahead and go over the next character, which is on the list going into the niche area. Now, the 2 characters here is going to be Yuki, and then of course my man Kiyoshi. But starting off with Yuki here, Yuki actually is still usable to this day. The only issue with her is, just as the actual section is called, she is very niche. In fact, I actually have the character built myself, and that's mainly because of course I like to go ahead and just test out different things and see how they really work. She's one of the few units that if you do start at 1.0 for global like I think things will go, you probably will end up building her if you are a fan of Yusuke himself. Reasoning for this is because this character gives you defense properties. With this in mind, this character genuinely was really good, especially at the beginning of the game, though it didn't withhold that point, right? It didn't really withhold anything that a lot of us truly did need. And so let me elaborate on this. When it comes down to anything DPS related, especially when it comes down to those characters, you usually are scaling off attack. Well, Yusuke is our only actual, at least attacker that scales off of defense. And this is where Yuki comes into handy. You have her who actually is able to give you those defense properties, but it's not as much as you really think you would get. In fact, you get a lot less compared to other DPS, or at least defense characters, and just Yuki got left behind. She's so niche to a point that you just don't need her anymore. Yes, you have a little bit of the defense bless damage that she's able to do that actually can heal you, seeing you are using a blessed character, but with the amount of defense that she has, she didn't give you really the actual shields that you needed or the good amount of defense that Yusuke really was looking for. So you kind of drifted away from this character eventually. But with her first skill, of course, she does of course give you some defense with the blessed damage that she deals based on her defense, and gives you a vow. After, of course, a certain amount of vows and at a random turn, she will give you a shield based on what you use, and pretty much how it would go, especially when it does come down to at least how her rotation goes, is usually using her skill 1 into her skill 3. That's going to be your main deal, or I think it was skill 1 into skill 2 if I remember correctly, which is the shield here. That's pretty much how you go with it. It's all right, it's okay, but you won't really use it too often. Now for this character as well, she has a solo shield that she's able to place on one person, which is pretty decent. It does give you a decent bit of defense here, which I would say without a doubt is pretty helpful. In fact, you used her a lot with Yuki all the time, but with the lack of defense DPSs, she automatically got thrown out to the side. And then also with the lack of another good 4-star defense DPS or 4-star defender, it just ended up leaving her in the dust to actually make a 5-star defender way better than her instead of having her as an option. So she lost that niche little area that she eventually had down packed first. With her skill 3, of course, when she has a certain amount of stacks here, she increases your actual allies damage here, which is also really good as well, and eventually will give you a shield based on the amount of stacks that you have. So I mean, it's pretty decent. Overall, she does have the shields. She has exactly what you want when it comes down to healing, but she still is missing a lot of that oomph when it comes down to at least the defense capabilities there. So it kind of understands why she's in the niche category. So going ahead and looking at the next character, which is going to be Yoshi. I did say him recently. Go ahead and go to the right here. Yoshi is one of my favorite units, but unfortunately the man also fell into that niche category. He's not the best, he's not the worst, and you would only really use him if you truly have to. Seeing that we have a ton more debuffers in the game now, especially one that is a fire debuffer, he left that team very, very quickly. So going ahead and going over what at least he can do, Yoshi himself is a interesting unit. In fact, he has a different type of DOT or a different type of mark called a sacrificial fire mark here, and it works somewhat different than normal. Now with this in mind, of course, this character still does have his points, but I feel like if he was a 5-star, he might be a little bit better. Unfortunately right now, it's just not there. So checking out his first skill, which is actually one of his most useless skills beside of course his skill 3 here, Inferno Blast actually deals a total amount of 26.7%. I currently have him at 26.2%, but of max HP. So really the most that you want to do with this character is build him on the HP side of things. The more HP you got on this guy, the more he will actually end up healing and actually helping out your team overall. But pretty much this fire damage will go to one enemy and has a 100 base chance to inflict a burn. Once this of course target has the burn, he will gain one more stack of martyr, and this changes the skill effect and deals 13.4% max HP fire damage to all enemies and has a 100% inflicting burn as well. So eventually pretty much how this is gonna go is he's able to immediately proc a actual burn. Though if the opponent already has a burn on this first skill, he then gives a different stack called martyr, which then can actually use this burn on everyone. It does come in handy, though that's not really what you're going to use it for, seeing it's really just not that good at all. The one that you really want to look for is the skill 3, but we eventually have to go ahead and talk about the skill 2. Now the skill 2 is going to be his absolute best actual weapon to utilize here. It's mainly because it's an AoE type of skill that really kind of makes everything go in the circle that it needs to go. It deals 20.2% max HP damage here to all enemies, and if they do have a burn, which you should be able to proc fairly easily, you gain 2 stacks of martyr. So this is going to be your quickest way of getting martyr, and whenever you do have more of these stacks here, it does increase your allies fire damage. So once again, he's not really a bad character, but I wouldn't suggest investing into him a lot, mainly because of how niche he can be. You have to run him with a fire team, or either it's just not going to help you. You have to proc a fire, or else it's just generally not going to help you at all. So with this in mind, of course, you're able to burn all the enemies, and then you will enter a state called Sacred Fire. Now, or at least Sacred Flame here. With this on, Sacred Flame is immediately allowing you to deal, or at least receive, 17.7% max HP fire damage on the enemies at hand. Now this will last for 2 whole turns, so you are getting that DOT effect of that Sacred Flame, though it's just not too long and it's not enough damage to really boot, even as a defender, or I mean as a debuffer. So you do have to keep that in mind. So all in all, the second skill is going to be your bread and butter, but it's just not going to be enough to save you. Because the next thing in line that's going to be fairly helpful with combat skills, and even that with what it does, which is mainly just making the enemy take more fire damage, it's not going to help you enough. Now the most let down to his whole kit is definitely going to be that skill 3, in which is absolutely useless, seeing that really you deal no damage and it is a single targeted skill, so you can only hit one person. The debuffer is only meant to debuff. You really don't have to do much damage to a person, and this definitely doesn't do it justice at all. The character is very lackluster in that, at least that opinion. But going ahead and checking out the tier list once again, we're gonna move up to the next tier. This tier is gonna be the okay tier, in which I'm gonna try to rapid fire these guys a little for you guys, so you're not having to deal with this too long. We have been talking for quite some time. We have a lot of people to go into. So going ahead and looking at least this tier list immediately here, we're gonna check out Okyann and our girl, what's it called, Arai and Mont. Now, first things first, checking out immediately Okyann. Absolute amazing unit, was absolutely insane at the time being, but unfortunately with this character, time did get to this unit, and there have been other navigators that did better. Okay, this character without a doubt did have her time in this, at least the shine, or at least the bright lights, I guess you could say, that she really was just the go-to unit. She really made everything kind of work, whether it came down to either giving your allies all different types of beats that can then give you at least defense, EHR, that was fairly helpful. But surely enough, as things did go on, it slowly died down with this character. Usage of this character definitely died down, and for at least actually having attack stats, seeing she was our only offensive Navi at the time, it definitely died down once we got our newer Navi. So over time, she just became utterly useless at that point, though if you wanted to go ahead and invest into her, you very well can, seeing she is pretty okay at doing so. I would advise going ahead and do so, at least until of course we get a 5-star Navi for you guys who like offensive things. Now going on to the next character, which is going to be Arai. She's also pretty darn good as well, but the only issue with her is after a while we did get another DPS. This DPS eventually just threw her out of the water here, though they weren't good either. They weren't really a nice choice here as well. And with what she can do, which actually had some AoE aspects here, you mainly were using her to use at least electric damage dealt and getting that electric damage dealt buff. Other than that, it really wasn't a necessary need to use this character. And with that in mind, you were kind of just using her for the shock to make sure you have increased crit rate. But as time went on and we got new or at least personas, this was something that kind of just left the field, and you really weren't using her too much. She then ended up becoming more of a supporter, in which was mainly used for buoy, which was part of the reason why she kind of just fizzled out. But even then, alongside buoy, she just wasn't doing enough, seeing that she became a supporter at this point in time with all the skills that she had in her arsenal, whether it was increasing your crit rate chance, giving you crit damage taken, or even giving you electric damage dealt. She just wasn't really doing enough in that category. Therefore, she stays in the okay category as well. And then lastly, going over the next okay category is going to be Mont. Now, this one is one of the few other characters that I also would say not to invest too heavily in, but is in the okay tier, and I kind of agree with this. Now, Mont is one of the few characters that now has a 5-star variant, and she was pretty awesome at her time. At that point in time, she can actually do a few things which are fairly helpful, seeing that she was decent at dealing some heavy crit damage, though you did need to build her as a crit rate demon, because at this point in time, once she of course critted, she would deal a crazy amount of damage. This was mainly going to be going with her skill 2 and her skill 3, and her skill 1 was just there just to look kind of pretty, where her skill 2 allowed you to charge ice crystals, which was part of her whole kit, and her skill 3 allowed you to use pretty much those said ice crystals to deal a ton of damage and actually trigger a different thing called Cold Blade, which allowed you to pretty much get up her her all out attacks for the most part. So that's going to be the main things that you really want to focus on this character. With the follow-up attacks that she ends up having with that said mechanic, she was also the only character who could really do that, so it did give her an extra advantage in the DPS category. But as time does go on here, her investment was okay, or at least good to have, but it slowly did die out, as well as at least the revelations that she does need in order to really be good. This character, without a doubt though, at the beginning of the game, if we don't have everyone off rip, I would definitely say is all right to go ahead and build. So truly do look at that as well. Now that we've blitzed through at least the okay tier for at least this tier list here, let's go ahead and check out the next tier, which is going to be the good tier list. Now the good tier list consists of Cattle and Puppet. Both of these characters aren't really as bad as you may think at the beginning of the game, and I'll actually tell you why here. So going ahead and looking at both these units here, and what you should see on the screen in a second, our man Cattle is actually pretty darn decent. He was getting a lot of backlash, of course, because we had characters like Morgana and things of that nature, but he honestly wasn't too bad. He helped out the fire side of things here, being a decent support at the end of the day, and with what he had at the actual in his arsenal was some decent, pretty nice heals. As long as you built him on at least attack and healing bonus, which is what he actually scaled off of, he was healing pretty darn nice. But then he's also able to at least buff your allies with Starfire. This is going to be the main thing that keeps him as a good sustain. So the main things that you really want to go ahead and use with this character: use his skill 1 and then just start spamming his skill 3. This just allows you to take advantage over not only just his buffs that he's able to do, but also applying burn, getting your SP, or at least trying to save your SP. So really just applying burn and just keeping your whole team alive. The more times you can go ahead and spam this HP, or at least this HP skill, the easier it will be to live. The only issue with him is, as I did say before, his SP amounts really did drag him down. Instead of actually being able to utilize him, it was very hard to do so, seeing that you are literally not going to be able to keep up with the amount of SP that this character is going to be dragging. So surely do keep that in mind, especially if you are going to be using this character, but he's not bad whatsoever. But the only skills that you're going to be using here is going to be the 1 and 3, and every so often the ultimate if you very well do need that, of course, attack buff alongside of the HP it does restore. Now the next character that we're going to be going over is our girl Puppet. Now Puppet actually had a really good spot in at least the meta for quite some time, or at least a really good spot in the defensive meta for quite some time, and that was mainly just because she's still our only defensive our defensive Navi. She's pretty darn good. She generates defense, or at least shields, and gives you a ton of defense as well, while also allowing you to make sure you don't get knocked down by having a knockdown resistance. So I mean, like, she was pretty darn good for her time. The only issue was after a while she just started to just go elsewhere. She wasn't really too good anymore. She was just a generic defensive Navi, and at that point in time you wouldn't really use her too much. So if you wanted to go ahead and use her skills here, it would end up being the skill 1, then maybe the skill 2 later on, or at least utilization properties, and then the skill 3. Skill 3 mainly gave you a damage bonus, or at least a damage boost. Skill 2 mainly needs you to have at least knockdown resistance or a big shield, and then the skill 1 just mainly gave you a small shield that went over everyone as well. Pretty decent, pretty nice, though the skill 1 was more of your AoE shield, while at least the skill 2 was mainly meant for one person, keeping them pretty much good and sustained. So I mean, the character herself was pretty darn decent for the time being, but defenders don't ever last too long, so it kind of fizzled her out very, very quickly. But now that we've went over at least that tier, let's go ahead and go on to the next tier here, which is going to be the very good tier. Now these characters are more or less your characters that you're still seeing in today's meta. You're still seeing them cycled out quite a lot here, so surely do keep this in mind. So going over each of these guys back to back here, we're going to start off with our man Soy. Now Soy you actually get from the story in at least the Palace 2, and you can actually summon him a little bit ahead of time as well, and Soy is absolutely amazing. Without a doubt, this is one of the few characters that I actually predicted would probably like last a lot longer. People didn't believe me at first, but he definitely is a really good character. In fact, you want to build this character on full on HP here, and the main thing is going to be defense shredding, tanking as much as possible using his wildness savior here, which allows him to actually tank a lot while also taunting the enemy. So he's able to get HP regain, taunt the enemy, reduce defense, and be just very strong on increasing damage dealt. The main things that you would like to go ahead and pay attention with this character will more or less be his skill 3, which allows you to, of course, easily get some more HP maxed out, which is absolutely amazing. And if you have a 5-star weapon, reduce your defense taken as well, or at least the damage that you have taken here. And then we have the skill 2, which actually reduces the enemy's defense, which is absolutely amazing. And then thankfully, since you do use his gun quite often, you're actually able to defense shred a lot. This character definitely kept his way up here and definitely deserves to be in this tier as much as possible. So the next character that we're going to go ahead and look at is going to be our man Flueret. Now, I was a little bit late on at least the Flueret train, and the main reasoning for this is because the guy Flueret quite literally wasn't used too often for me. I always didn't want to use wind characters, and until later on, I didn't really have a need to use them. But he actually packs a punch. In fact, he's actually really powerful, and with the amount of things that he can actually do, he makes himself very known to be a very good powerful ally if you are utilizing him as a 4-star. The main things that you're going to really just use with him is just going to be that skill 3 to keep it as positive or at least powerful as possible, and most of his kit is going to be based off his resolve and winded issues. When you go ahead and just use skill 3, which is the only thing that you really are going to be using, you need to make sure that you have winded applied on the enemy. This pretty much allows you to deal as much damage as possible while having a defense down, pretty much just optimizing his extra hit of damage and all of his hits of damage depending on at least the fight at hand. So really just pay attention to this. He's pretty darn decent, and he actually increases his crit rate by 20%, so it's going to be really nice to go ahead and use. But both his 1 skill and his 2nd skill I would definitely advise not to invest in. Just give this man as much crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent, and you got it good to go. Either way, if you have at least a 4-star weapon, continue going with crit rates. Though if you do have that crit damage weapon or at least a 5-star weapon, seeing that it already provides crit rate, just go ahead and go for crit damage and you'll have the best option ever. This is definitely a good character, so surely do consider using it. Now we have the next character that we're going to be going over, which is going to be our girl Vino. Vino here is still a unit that is heavily, and I mean heavily, ran in a multitude of teams. That's mainly because of what she can do. Now this character once again is a majorly good debuffer here, and her whole kit around at least revolves around elemental elements. Whether you either shock a person, you go ahead and use winded, you burn, or even if you freeze, she is very helpful with this in general. She's able to take down at least defense down with her skill 1 and damage taken with her skill 3, while allowing her to just pretty much spam as much as possible with the elements in hand. These both are going to be very useful, seeing that of course with freeze, she's able to actually make it so you take less damage, and then with shock, when it is applied on the person, allow you to have 10% more crit rate. So she's very helpful, and if you are definitely summoning for Makoto when she does come out, aka Makoto Nijima, she will definitely be very helpful in that way to get the most damage out of it. So pretty much the only things that you want to focus on is the skill 1 and then skill 3, and just repeat that process over and over again to deal some crazy damage. This character, without a doubt, if you wanted to go ahead and just get built, would definitely be worth the time. All right, so going ahead and actually just taking a breather here, you guys are still watching the video. Of course, I'll have timestamps for this as well, but be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out a lot. I wanted to go really detailed for this, so I do apologize if the video is very much so long. But now that we went over this, let's go ahead and go over our next character. So the next character that we're going to go ahead and look at, this is actually going to be the 4-star Riko, in which, let me go ahead and find her. Here she is at the end here. 4-star Riko is one of the few characters that we got for Palace 3, and boy oh boy is she stinking good. She's able to knock down enemies, give them at least, or give your team a damage bonus boost, while also taking down defense related matter. This is a crazy good character, and for a 4-star, I don't think anyone saw this one coming at all, seeing that she's absolutely amazing. Her first skill actually does a decent bit of defense decrease while also taking down vulnerability on the target, allowing you to pretty much rip off shields that are on the enemy, aka the knockdown shields, make it easier to knock them down. But she can also automatically trigger this as well, so it really made her very powerful. 3 and 1 were her main go-tos, but of course her second skill wasn't all too bad, but you weren't really using it too much. Her third skill, on the other hand, actually granted all your allies pride, which actually increased your damage dealt whenever of course you needed it here. So that was also really good. It was based on her speed as well. So whenever you had more speed, you had more damage. The more of course of that, you were actually just enjoying your life at that point. So at this point in time, The skill 3, skill 1 were what you were looking for, and seeing that she's a Navi and already sharing her skills anyways, this was absolutely amazing. So definitely try to invest into her. Now the next character that we're actually going to be talking about in this tier is actually one of the newest characters, which is Luce. Now Luce himself is absolutely insane. He's one of the few characters who are definitely a best in slot for our man Makoto Yuki, and that one I have to say, he even surprised me. He can actually change what modes he's in based on his mask, allowing him to have not only DOT effects, technical mastery, one of them, crit damage potential, and pin rate increasements with that type of potential as well. He has all of this in his kit while also being a nice buffer with attack percentage raised. This is actually really good to actually have on this, and seeing that he is a blessed unit, you can also get some nice healing out of the deal as well. But based on the amount of blessed stacks that you do have, just on his first passive, he's actually able to increase his damage dealt by 5% up to a whopping 25%, which is really helpful as well. He also does build a little bit of EHR with his second passive skill, which does in tandem help you out in at least the attack percentage, at least area. So I do have to say, he's really nice, but he's also pretty much a wild card. Yes, he has a little bit of everything, including with his second skill. Not only does he have a ton of offensive abilities in DOT slash just buffing abilities, but he also buffs defense related stats. These defense related stats are also built off of his attack percentage, which makes him absolutely insane. As you can tell, I really do enjoy this character. I haven't gotten him built just yet, but with the small times that I've used him, he's definitely impressed me quite a lot. So I definitely suggest you guys to build him as fast as possible when he does release. Now, finally, taking a look at the final time of release this tier list here, which you guys can go ahead and look immediately. This is going to be Leon. Now, Leon, I don't really have to say much about this character, and that's mainly just because he's very simple, okay? He's meant mainly just to be a crit damage buffer, and that's all you'll really use this guy for. With the crit damage that he does end up having here, you're really going to see it inside of at least his passive, which gives you a decent bit of crit damage, being a whopping amount of 45%. This is all going to be at least backed onto his activation stacks here, which you will get quite often. So surely do keep that in mind when it does come with at least utilizing Leon himself. This character kind of took me by surprise though. I won't even lie to you. I didn't use him at first. I knew he was good, but everyone just overly used him, so it kind of drew me away from him. But him himself is also meant for new teams, but he can also be used in other teams that just really require attack buffs and crit damage buffs. With his kit actually utilizing his activation skills and things of this nature, when the lower the character is, of course, the more damage he's able to actually deal, in which he does actually apply something that can help out with that. That's going to be his skill 2, which does take away a little bit of your HP and gives you a shield in return, but also allows you to deal a ton of crit damage based off. And oh my god, I hope that I did not pack that up. I'm so sorry, you guys. But also allows you to deal a ton of damage as well. Now, his full potential definitely is going to happen when it does come down to his A6, and a lot of you guys will check that out a little bit more, seeing that he'll start having more stacks of crit damage and attack that you can actually place on your DPSs. This is going to make more of his at least highlight viable as well, so surely do keep that in mind. But what you would go ahead and like to do for the most part is use that skill 2 followed up into the skill 3, and then you have one hard hitting DPS that is at your disposal. I advise you guys to hardcore build this man, especially for the long-term investment, seeing that he's really good for Guild Boss, SOS, and other content as well. But now we've done yapping our heads off here. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this video. If you did, please do smash that like button with your forehead and consider subscribing if you are new. I am very sorry that this took a hot minute to do here, but I wanted to make sure y'all got all at least the details as possible with me explaining exactly how this character does work, or all these characters do work. So I do apologize if it's very long. I tried to speed it up near the end slash middle, but I do apologize about that as well. Until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay sharp. Peace out.